In 1974, history was made. The Buffalo Sabres drafted the first ever Japanese-born player into the NHL. The only problem? He didn't actually exist. This is the story of Taro Tujimoto. Let's talk about it. You heard that right. An actual professional sports team drafted a player that wasn't even real. But how does that even happen? How does an organization not do enough research into a player to find out that he doesn't actually exist before selecting him in a draft? Well, that's because they made the player up themselves and drafted him as a joke. Let's back up a few years to figure out how we get to a spot where a team will actually make up a player as a joke and draft him on draft night. In 1971, a new hockey league was established called the World Hockey Association, in an attempt to compete with the NHL. See, back then there were only 14 teams in the NHL, and this new league was hoping to capitalize by bringing the sport to cities in the US and Canada that didn't currently have a team. And when you're a new league trying to compete against an already established professional league, what do? You have to make a big splash, which is what they did. They stole Bobby Hull from the Blackhawks, giving him the largest contract in hockey history. 10 years, $2.7 million. Allow me to squirrel here a little bit because this is a funny bit of trivia. And if you can leave every episode with a little nugget that you didn't know before, I've done my job. I mean, hell, who doesn't love random useless facts? The league didn't even stick around long enough to fulfill the entirety of that contract. They gave him a 10-year deal in 1972, and by 1979, the entire league had folded. And as a little added trivia bonus, when the World Hockey Association ended, there were 4 teams that the NHL decided to merge with. The Quebec Nordiques, which became the Colorado Avalanche, the New England Whalers, which became the Hartford Whalers, which then became the Carolina Hurricanes, the Winnipeg Jets, which then became the Arizona Coyotes, which are now the Utah Mammoth, and the only team that stayed intact, the Edmonton Oilers. But this video isn't even about the World Hockey Association. This video is about the 1974 draft when the Buffalo Sabres picked a player that didn't exist. Maybe I should just start putting a little squirrel on the bottom of the screen so when I get on these random tangents, it'll just pop up. And if you're only here for the main story, you can skim through until you see this little guy disappear. But I hope you like these little rants because I'm going to go on them all the time because that's just how my brain works. All right, let's reel it back in and try to get back on topic. What does the World Hockey Association have anything to do with the Buffalo Sabres taking a fake player? Well, that's because the other way they were getting people to sign to come to their league was actually offering them contracts before the NHL even had a chance to draft them, essentially attempting to poach all of the amateur and college athletes out there. So Clarence Campbell, who was the president of the NHL at the time, had a genius idea. Let's move the draft up, let's do it in secret, and we'll do it all over the phone. That was sarcasm. It was a terrible idea. So instead of doing a normal draft like they always do, this year teams had to submit their picks via phone call in secret, like they were some sort of double agent in the Cold War passing along national secrets. So let me give you a breakdown of how this went down. And buckle up because it's a shit show. When it was your turn to draft, Campbell would call you and then list every single player that had been picked since the last time he talked to you, and then go, all right, it's your turn. Who do you want to take?
Hello?
Hey Bob, it's Clarence. You got a pen and paper ready?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The last 18 picks were John, Bob, Charlie, Brad, John, Pete, Gordon, Dan, Bill, Dick, Michael, Gary, Barry Ann, Jerry, Marty, Bob, and Tom. So, who would you like to select? That phone call had to happen for every single pick in a 25-round draft. Punch Imlock was the general manager for the Buffalo Sabres and was rightfully frustrated with how long this process was taking. So he decided to have a little fun and asked Paul Weiland if he would help create a fake player for them to draft. Weiland decided to make the player Japanese, but really wanted some authenticity to his name and backstory, and remembered when he was in college he would always pass a grocery store owned by a Japanese man named Joshua Tujimoto. But he took it a step further. He actually had a secretary call the grocery store and talk to the man to find out A, if it's okay if they use his last name, and B, what a really popular first name for a boy would be in Japan. His response? Taro. Now that they had the name down, it was time for the backstory. Taro Tujimoto was a 20-year-old undersized forward who played in the Japanese Hockey League for the Tokyo Katanas. And even though he was undersized at only 5'8", 180 pounds, he managed to score 15 goals and 25 points in that season. Did you notice what the team he played for was? Not only did they make up the player, they also made up the team. They were the Buffalo Sabres, and he played for the Tokyo Katanas. A saber is a sword. A katana is a sword. Buffalo Sabres, Tokyo Katanas. Don't you just love a good pun? In the 10th round, they selected Derek Smith, and with nobody left on their big board that they thought had a reasonable chance to make the team, they decided that the 11th round would be where the infamous pick would come. It's the 183rd pick in the 11th round of the 1974 NHL draft. Campbell calls the Sabres and lists off the 14 players that had been drafted since the last time he talked to him. And with their pick, the Buffalo Sabres draft Taro Tujimoto, the 20-year-old Japanese player from the Tokyo Katanas. What's funny is part of the reason why they chose that name and backstory was knowing that when Campbell would call the other 17 general managers, he would have to say the name and spell it out every single time.
Hello?
Hey Jake, it's Clarence. You guys are on the clock. The Sabres took Taro Tujimoto with their pick. They took who? Taro Tujimoto. T-A-R-O space T-S-U-J-I-M-O-T-O. Taro Tujimoto. Okay. We select Jacques Locus. The draft is concluded. Nobody questioned the pick, and a list of all 247 players selected were published, sent to every team, and passed to all the news outlets. Upon reading the full list of draft picks, several journalists were super intrigued and interested with the Tujimoto pick. I mean, heck, that would be a big deal. The first ever Japanese-born player is going to come play in the NHL, a league that to this day still doesn't have much diversity in it. But little to nothing is known by Americans about the Japanese Hockey League. And it's the 1970s. You can't just Google the Tokyo Katanas and figure out who this player is. If you wanted any information, you'd actually have to get on a plane, fly over to Tokyo, and interview the guy yourself. And clearly no news stations or newspapers were willing to expense that trip, thus the secret was safe. What's crazy is even after the draft concluded, they decided to still keep the secret alive, including from the president of their own team. That's right, they made this pick, had this plan, and didn't even tell the president of the hockey team, which I can only assume means that they had a really good relationship with this dude and he had a pretty good sense of humor, because that's a ballsy move. They took this bit all the way into training camp and even gave him his own locker. Imlach was asked often by reporters, when are we going to get to see Tujimoto? When is he coming to the United States and joining the team? To which he would reply he wasn't sure yet, but even if he didn't come this season, the team would still hold his rights and would be able to play next year. But eventually the jig was up, and Imlach would have to admit that the player was fake. And Campbell was pissed, striking the name from the record and marking it as an invalid pick. But thankfully the fans embraced the joke, and it's actually become like an inside joke within the Buffalo Sabres community. They would put up banners that say, Taro says, and then make a joke about the opposing team or player. Or when they're losing, they would chant, we want Taro, we want Taro. You can even go to games today and see people wearing jerseys that say, Tujimoto with 74 on it. Though fun fact, the team actually assigned him number 13. But I get it happened in 1974, so that's the number you're going to give the player when you're making these fake jerseys. Weiland even wrote a book called Taro Lives, Confessions of the Sabre Hoaxer. That year the Sabres would go on to win their division with a record of 49-16-15 and actually make it all the way to the Stanley Cup playoffs, where unfortunately in 6 games they would lose to the Philadelphia Flyers.
The Flyers have won their second consecutive Stanley Cup, and the whole Flyers bench is off the ice.
But if they won, you have to imagine, would they figure out a way to engrave Taro Tujimoto onto the Stanley Cup? I guess we'll never know. Thanks for watching this episode of High Fiving Strangers. Like, subscribe, and comment down below what player, team, or event you want to see me cover next. The best way to support the channel is buying some merch. Check out this Set on Sundays t-shirts for us poor, pathetic Browns fans. And as always, get out there and high five some strangers. For the real professional teams, hit my mic, in the NHL, that is a tongue twister. All right, you got this.